Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and goings-ons with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked,
Glad to be here, Damon.
and Jonathon Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
And this week we have the NPD numbers for the first quarter of the year. So this is the first 3 months of 2022. NPD tracks video game sales in the US, both software and hardware. And the Xbox Series is the first quarter's best-selling platform in the US by dollars made. The Nintendo Switch sold more units, but the Xbox Series made the most money. So my first question, Ryan, does that tell us, did the Xbox Series family outsell PlayStation 5 in the first quarter of the year, being that the Series X is the same price as PS5 and then the Series S is cheaper?
It would sure seem that way. Regardless, it's really good news for Microsoft, and it's a story of chip supply. I would think. I mean, Microsoft clearly able to get more units out there. We've seen, we've talked about it the last couple weeks on this podcast of how the Series X is finally starting to become available a little bit. The Series S is more widely available, and you can actually drill all the way down to things like chip yields and speculate with there where there's only so many chips you can get on a single wafer, and they have to be viable. There's always a failure rate. There's always you want to get as many out of each wafer as you can. And Series S chips may have been viable when Series X chips weren't. So they might have been able to use their yields effectively to make the same number of yields to make more consoles, possibly. And not, I'm just speculating here, than Sony was able to. But yeah, the two console strategy clearly paying off for Microsoft here in the early portion of this new generation.
Mm-hmm. And Jonathan, what's your take on all this? If PS5 didn't sell the most units or make the most money, that puts them in last place, right?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm mostly focused on wafers after Ryan talking about them.
Yeah.
I'm very hungry. But other than that, no, for the first quarter, that would seem to be the way it would shake out, presumably both by dollars sold and by units sold as well. And it, I think, makes sense for everything we're hearing. I think both specifically in the way that we've seen PlayStation kind of trend down their expectations for PS5 sales, both recently and then forward looking as well. Obviously, we'll probably know more once their next earnings report comes out, whereas we have Xboxes already. But yeah, to Ryan's point, I think it comes down to a matter of supply, and the strategy that Xbox took with the dual system setup seems to have really proven out. I think even we've talked about on the show, even anecdotally, for months now, at least since, late last year, people have talked about seeing Series S's on shelves somewhat regularly. And that's still not a thing you hear with PS5s and to a lesser extent Series X's. So I think it is very much an interesting supply thing because in terms of the PS5s, people are still, can't find them when they're looking for them. Gran Turismo was the second best-selling game for March. Horizon Forbidden West is one of the top 5 selling games of the year. Mm-hmm. Obviously, PlayStation games are selling well, and, Elden Ring is the highest selling game on PlayStation the last couple months. People are buying games for PlayStation. They're just not able to get the new console yet. So, especially with previous reports that PlayStation was going to allegedly ramp up PS4 production to help meet that demand, it's not surprising that the first quarter played out this way.
Do you think it's purely a supply issue that Xbox was able to manufacture more, and if Sony were able to make more PS5s, it likely would be in the top spot?
I don't know if it would be in top, at least in both. I think, numbers-wise, we probably would still see the Switch up there, but I think it would certainly be a possibility, absolutely, if it was able to push as many units, if not more so. I think we could potentially see it there, because the demand is obviously there. The games have been there, the interest has been there. So yeah, I do think it comes down a bit to that. Of course, that's theoretical, and we can never really know, but I think it would potentially be there, but I think it's also very, very smart and awesome to see Xbox's strategy and bet on doing this generation a different way prove out to be working this way.
Ryan, what's your take? Do you think Xbox has just 100% earned this based on value and offerings, or has it kind of won by forfeit on Sony's part?
Oh, I don't think it's that. I mean, sure, I would agree that if if supply were a non-issue, the PlayStation 5 would probably still be number one at this point. I mean, Microsoft, it was never realistic for them to erase the massive deficit that they dug themselves last generation in a year and a quarter. I mean, that was not going to happen. But are they going to close the gap? Are they closing the gap? Absolutely. Have they, through whatever means, whether it's just paying more for chips with the chip supplier, whatever it is they're doing to procure more chips and a higher supply, that's a credit to them. I mean, whether it's their planning, their checkbook, it doesn't matter. They're able to satisfy more consumer demand, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. And certainly, Game Pass is driving interest in the hardware. The first party acquisitions are driving interest in the hardware and in the ecosystem. So it's certainly, the answer lies somewhere in between, Damon, as always. But
Sure.
yeah, Microsoft deserves a lot of credit, and Sony, they have a good problem of demand being greater than supply, but it is still a problem, and Microsoft seems to be navigating that problem a little bit better right now.
And to your point, certainly the longer that problem goes on, I do think that creates a major issue for PlayStation. If they aren't able to meet that demand, people are going to want a system either way. And if they're able to get the Xbox and they're willing to give up a few of those exclusives for the time being, there may be a lot of people doing that. Obviously, we've seen people jump between platforms from generation to generation. So yeah, I think, to Ryan's point, I do think it's a mix of both. A credit to the amazing work Xbox has been doing over the last couple of years to rehabilitate their image in such a great way. And then, the strange ongoing supply issues that we're going to probably see for the foreseeable future.
And even to your point, Jonathan, even if those people that are waiting and get frustrated, even if they only, in air quotes, buy a Series S as like a stopgap, say, I want to start playing some next-gen games, my PS4 isn't cutting it, I'll get a PS5 when I can get one, but I want to jump in and maybe I'll get Game Pass, get the first-party stuff from Microsoft on a Series S. That's still a win for Microsoft at the end of the day.
Sure. Well, it was a record March for Microsoft. The last time they sold this many consoles in a March was March of 2011.
Right? Yeah.
Back in, obviously the heyday of the Xbox 360. And the last time they made this much money in a March was in 2014. I guess that would have been a few months into the lifespan of the Xbox One, which is a little bit surprising since, famously kind of stumbled out of the gate.
Titanfall
But Ryan
came out that month, though. That was a big deal at the time.
There you go. That's right. That was an Xbox exclusive. Ryan, this success Xbox is enjoying in the first quarter of the year is in spite of the fact that Microsoft hasn't released any games this year, right?
Yeah, it's all quiet on the Xbox front for now, whereas Sony has had a phenomenal 2022 thus far. Right. There's only one megaton of a game left that I'm sure Jonathan will remind us of coming up that's at least on the calendar right now.
Never heard
for PS5. But yeah, Microsoft, they also have one megaton game, and that's it. But for the whole year, really. I mean, yeah, okay, Tunic behind me. I reviewed it. I love it. But, it's just respectfully not a game that's going to sell systems and sell tens of millions of units. Starfield due on November 11th. But there is nothing currently on the calendar otherwise in terms of first-party games, exclusive games for Xbox the rest of this year.
Well, speaking of those two highly anticipated first-party games from both Xbox and PlayStation, we're going to talk about those in just a moment. But first, variable refresh rate support is rolling out for PlayStation 5 this week. What is variable refresh rate? What does it mean for your PS5 games? IGN's executive editor of tech, Bo Moore, has the answers.
This week, Sony announced that variable refresh rate, or VRR, will finally be rolling out to PS5s. This means that on compatible TVs and monitors, the display's refresh rate will be dynamically synced with the PS5's frame rate, resulting in smoother visuals and eliminating screen tearing. To get VRR to work, though, you'll first need a few things. First, your TV or monitor needs to have an HDMI 2.1 input, and you'll need to make sure that your cable is HDMI 2.1 as well. Next, not every PS5 game will support VRR right out of the gate. Sony mentions 15 games that will receive a patch enabling VRR in the coming weeks, including Astro's Playroom, Deathloop, Spider-Man Remastered and Miles Morales, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Resident Evil Village, and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. More games will be updated to support VRR in the weeks and months to come, And in the meantime, there's an option to turn on VRR even for unsupported games. Just know that this might result in unexpected or otherwise imperfect results, depending on the game's settings, or even what kind of TV or monitor that you're using. Back to you, Damon.
Thank you, Bo. Okay, we've got the results of last episode's poll. We asked, what game are you looking forward to most this year? And perhaps unsurprisingly, the winner was God of War Ragnarok with 48% of the vote. But Starfield came in second with just about 35%. So, Jonathan, we haven't gotten a release date for God of War Ragnarok as of yet, but I think everyone is definitely hoping it doesn't get the Breath of the Wild 2 treatment. It actually makes it out by the end of the year. How are you feeling about God of War Ragnarok's chances these days?
I still have every hope and expectation that it comes out this year. I think we might have touched on it last week a little bit, but the anniversary of God of War 2018 going by without a big news showing, I think is just because the team wants to show the game when they know it's in a ready state. This isn't a game where you necessarily need to eke out a ton of little details over a long period of time. There's such a love and affection for the last game, and of course the series overall, that I think they're just waiting to show it when they can show enough and give details. I think that's kind of what we're waiting for. So I still have every confidence that it comes this year. If it doesn't and the team needs more time, I think PlayStation fans would be bummed, but hopefully understanding that that's just what needs to happen. But I would still expect it to come this year.
And then Ryan, of course, Starfield coming in at number 2, but maybe a little bit worrisome for Xbox is the fact that Hellblade 2 came in dead last in the poll, less than 3% of the vote. And that was a game that, we both agreed last week is probably likely to make it out by the end of this year. Are you surprised for the lack of enthusiasm for Hellblade 2?
Really, because we haven't even given a release window for it yet, and that could change in less than 2 months at whenever Microsoft holds their inevitable summer showcase / E3 not E3 press conference. But yeah, I think once we have a window for that game, the hype will start to build. I mean, that showing at the Game Awards was great. I mean, it looked phenomenal. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of nobody let it sort of seep into their minds yet, because nobody has any expectation for when to expect it. As soon as we get that information, then yeah, I think you'll start to see the love for Hellblade 2 build up.
All right, well, dear viewer, we have a poll for you to vote on for next week. We want to know, what do you think will end up being the best-selling console of the year? Will it be PS5, Xbox Series, or Nintendo Switch? Make sure to vote at IGN.com. We'll share the results with you next week. Jonathan, what do you think? Which console do you think will be on top at the end of 2022?
I think we're still going to see the Switch end up on top. I think its momentum has not slowed down, and Nintendo has a really busy next few months, and then we don't even know what the fall is other than Pokemon at this point, but Pokemon is big enough to sell more systems. So I think they're going to be in a pretty good place.
Do you agree, Ryan?
Yeah, it's tough to argue just the price disparity alone between PlayStation and Xbox and then the Switch. And plus the name recognition, the great reputation, as Jonathan alluded to. I mean, and they don't seem maybe quite as starved for chips or for supply as PlayStation and Xbox are, which there's a lot of factors that go into that. I mean, it's a 5+ year old design. It's probably they can probably get those higher yields, etc. But yeah, I think the Switch will have a great year, and the second place console will probably be whichever one can make the most units.
And of course, as we've seen this month, the Switch can be the best-selling console in terms of units, and then one of the other guys might end up making more money. We'll see at the end of the year. All right, that will do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to Ryan and Jonathan. Thank you to Tayo working behind the scenes this week to make this episode possible. My name is Damon. We'll be back next Friday, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.